Are you looking for the best Sony cameras? In this video we will look at some of the 7 best Sony cameras on the market. Before we get started with our video, we have included links in the description, so make sure you check those out to see which one is in your budget range. Number 1. Sony A7S III. The Sony A7S III is an absolutely remarkable camera when it comes to capturing video. This camera is going to give you a significant improvement to the video you've been capturing. Whether you've been using a different camera or its predecessor, the Sony A7S II. The improved 12.1 MP XMR APS-C CMOS sensor pairs with the Bian's XR processor for higher quality video and faster performance. Specifically, this new model allows for a wider dynamic range and reduced noise even when pushing the ISO. This camera is capable of a comfortable 4K at 120p. That's outstanding video performance for everyone from wedding videographers to filmmakers. Filmmakers are going to get a lot of mileage out of the improved dynamic range. The Sony A7S III was boosted up to 14 stops of dynamic range for photographs and 15 for the moving image. The Sony A7S III natively records 10-bit 4:2:2 video quality, but you can use the full-size HDMI port to record at 16-bit for more information to work with when it comes time to edit. The Sony A7S III also lets you record up to 5 times slow-motion video thanks to being able to shoot 4K at 120 frames per second. You can even downscale the footage to full HD for an impressive 240 frames per second slow-motion recording. This is the kind of depth you're looking for in high-end video recording. You want to have the most information you can in a video file so that when it comes time to edit, you've got so much more to work with. The build quality of the Sony A7S III is also very impressive. It shares a similar magnesium alloy chassis design as other Sony cameras in this family. The Sony A7S III also has comprehensive weather sealing designed to protect typical points of moisture weakness, including the joints in the chassis as well as the ports themselves. The battery life on this camera is also one of the things that impressed me the most. Even when using the LCD touchscreen, you can shoot up to 600 still images or around 95 minutes of video before your battery gives out. This is also a unique videography camera as it has 2 memory card slots that you can set up to act as a backup, overflow, or have them work in tandem for boosted storage. Number 2. Sony ZV-E10. The Sony ZV-E10 is the camera that's going to offer you everything you need to start vlogging or improve your existing vlogging setup. Vloggers don't always need the same level of video power as filmmakers. You can save a few $1,000s by picking up the Sony ZV-E10 instead of a larger Sony Alpha camera. However, the Sony ZV-E10 is far from being a discount camera. The Sony ZV-E10 can film in 4K up to 30 frames per second, and you can even capture slow-motion footage at 120 frames per second by dropping things down to full HD. 4K at 30 frames per second is more than enough for pretty much every social media video platform as well as streaming platforms like Twitch. This little camera is more than capable of being your go-to workhorse if your main video output is websites like YouTube. Speaking of streaming, the Sony ZV-E10 can actually do something that some of the other best Sony Alpha camera models cannot. Many Sony cameras are held back by only being able to record up to 30 minutes of video at a time. This prevents those larger cameras from overheating but limits how you can shoot your video. The Sony ZV-E10 is capable of shooting a functionally infinite amount of video. Sony technically lists its maximum continuous recording time as 13 hours. But I can't think of many situations where you would need to even get close to that limit. This makes the Sony ZV-E10 a great choice for your main streaming camera. If you're looking for something that gives you a significant boost in video quality from your standard webcam, the Sony ZV-E10 can be a great choice. The ergonomics of this camera have also been designed with vlogging and live streaming in mind. It's just as comfortable to hold the Sony ZV-E10 in selfie mode as it is in the traditional rear-facing mode. The flip-out screen also makes it easy to make sure that your shots are always framed right and in focus. You can even swap out the kit lens for your favorite Sony A mount lens to get even more control over your composition. Number 3. Sony A6400. The Sony A6 range of APS-C sensor mirrorless cameras has been a favorite of a great many photographers the world over, ever since the release of the A6000 way back in 2014. Since then, every release of a new A6XX body has seen some relatively small set of feature updates, typical of a camera that's been updated so frequently. Despite the more recent release of the Sony A6100, A6600 and A6700 cameras, I still believe the A6400 offers the best bang for the buck, proving that you don't need the newest Sony camera all the time. With the A6400, what has Sony brought to the table this time? Is it just a vlogging camera? Or is there something there for us stills shooters too? I spent 2 months shooting with it to find out. First off, everything revolves around a glorious 24.2 megapixel XMOS sensor, which provides an impressive ISO sensitivity range and excellent low noise performance, especially for APS-C standards. I was able to shoot comfortably at ISO 800 all night long and still obtain clean files and accurate colors. Thanks to a front-end LSI and the latest Bionic X image processor, Sony claims processing speeds that are 1.8x faster on the Sony A6400 when compared to its predecessors. In practice, this means a faster buffer, allowing it to keep shooting 11 FPS for 46 RAW plus JPG, 49 RAW, or 114 JPG. That's pretty impressive when you consider everything's kept in pin-sharp focus thanks to real-time IF. One downside, though, is the sluggish buffer performance. During testing, the buffer took around 40 seconds to clear 49 shots in burst mode, even with a fast memory card. The Sony A6400 boasts a much improved build quality, with the standout feature being a touch-enabled, 180-degree rotating LCD screen, much to the delight of vloggers and anyone who likes to take selfies. There are surprisingly few cameras that offer a front-facing LCD screen, but the A6400 handles this relatively well, as long as you don't need to mount a hot shoe mix since the screen prevents you from doing this without a cage of some sort. Number 4. Sony A7R V. Almost everything about the Sony A7R V makes it an ideal camera for anyone interested in capturing stunning landscape shots. All Sony digital cameras can be used for landscape photography, or any other type of photography for that matter. However, this one is particularly well suited. I want to kick things off by talking about the body of this camera. The magnesium alloy chassis is paired with comprehensive weather sealing that covers all of the ports and compartments, as well as the joints in the chassis. I always get a little nervous when it starts to rain during the landscape shoot, but I'm confident that the Sony A7R V is going to handle even the toughest weather I'd be shooting in. One of the most important things to look for in a landscape camera is resolution. The Sony A7R V offers 61 megapixels backed by the new XMR APS-C sensor and Bionic XR processor power. This camera also does something very unique that sent it to the top of this list for anyone interested in landscape shooting. It can do pixel shift multi-shooting. Pixel shift multi-shooting captures several separate images in quick succession by physically moving the sensor of the camera in 1 pixel or half pixel increments. The resulting images can then be stitched together to create a single photograph with an effective megapixel resolution of 240.8. That's an image size of 19,008 by 12,672 pixels. Your landscape prints are going to have a level of detail like you've never had before when you're shooting on the Sony A7R V. This is also incredibly helpful if you plan on printing or displaying larger landscape photographs. This also means that you'll be able to stitch together some of the most impressive panoramas I've ever seen. There's also a lot of overlap between shooting landscape photography and cityscapes, vehicles, and even working with subjects like people and animals. The Sony A7R V excels at capturing this wide variety of subject material for when you want to mix things up and not just shoot traditional landscapes. The autofocus can even automatically detect and track vehicles like planes, trains, and automobiles. Number 5. Sony A7. The Sony A7 is the camera that started a revolution. If there was ever a camera that caused most photographers to switch to a mirrorless system, this is most certainly it. If you're thinking about switching to the best Sony camera or contemplating a move to mirrorless from DSLRs, don't waste your time anymore. The Sony A7 is pretty much your perfect full-frame digital mirrorless camera. It's one of the best Sony cameras with its own set of quirks, but for the most part, it's ideal. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that this is the best Sony camera for photography enthusiasts and even professionals. That isn't the latest Sony camera, it won't cost you an arm and a leg, particularly if you buy it second-hand. Despite being the company's entry-level full-frame mirrorless digital camera, the Sony A7 is still the model that's caused the most waves in the camera industry since its release in February 2018. Sitting underneath the megapixel monster A7 IV and the speed demon A9, two expensive full-frame cameras that, although enticing, are rather specific in their usage, the A7 offers class-leading technology at a surprisingly affordable price. See latest discounts here. Under the hood of one of the best Sony cameras, everything revolves around a glorious Sony 24.2 MP APS-C full-frame image sensor, which produces sharp, vivid, and contrasty JPEGs and RAW files with tons of dynamic range. If you're used to incredible high ISO performance coming from a flagship DSLR, you won't be disappointed with the 50 all the way up to 204,800 ISO of the A7. I can shoot all day at ISO 6400 if necessary, where images are impressively clean, with noise only creeping in slightly at ISO 12800. As for autofocus capabilities, prepare to be blown away. With 693 phase detection of points offering 93% image coverage, real-time IF, and 10 FPS, any subject you miss will be down to pure user error. IF, a feature now common on all recent Sony cameras, is akin to black magic. Locking onto a subject's eyeball in the frame and staying glued to it until you're ready to take the photo. IF is a feature on the Sony A7 that will have you wondering how you shot photos of people, or animals, without it before. Number 6. Sony A1. The Sony A1 is a true flagship camera and represents the best of what Sony currently has to offer for photographers and videographers. If you want a camera that is ready for absolutely anything, this Sony A series camera is the one for you. The image quality on the Sony A1 is some of the best I've seen. The 50-megapixel full-frame mirrorless APS-C sensor delivers crystal clear images within an impressive ISO range of 5100 and 2400. This camera is going to help you knock it out of the park when you're shooting at weddings, events, or even concerts in dimly lit venues. The autofocus system covers 92% of the image with a combination of 759 phase detection points and 425 contrast detection areas. The Sony A1's AF system works for both photo and video applications. The AF system is built to automatically focus and track eyes, whether your subject is human or animal. Wildlife photographers will definitely have an easy time keeping their subjects in focus even if they are constantly changing speed. The video capability on the Sony A1 is nothing short of stunning. You can comfortably shoot in 4K even up to 120 frames per second. But this camera also shoots 8K at 30 FPS. It's got more than enough computing power to handle those large file sizes. It also has a useful library of different video codecs so you can optimize your shooting for social media or wherever else you'll be displaying your footage. I'm going to take a quick break from talking about the technical power of the Sony A1 to discuss the ergonomics and feel of this camera. The smaller size of mirrorless cameras has definitely been a challenge for anyone used to do a larger and heavier, DSLR body. The Sony A1 actually has a little bit more weight to it, making it feel more familiar in my hands. This also helps it counterbalance larger lenses that might feel a little unbalanced on some of these smaller DS mirrorless bodies. Number 7. Sony A7 IV. I've been shooting with since 2022. This is Sony's most popular line of mirrorless cameras, and they have pulled out all the stops when it comes to updating the new model. Some would even argue that this is Sony's best camera. The Sony A7 IV makes it easy to see why Sony caused so many photographers to switch from DSLR to mirrorless. As with any good camera, I should start by talking about the image quality of the Sony A7 IV. The new 33MP XMR APS-C ICMOS sensor provides outstanding image quality. As with most other Sony mirrorless cameras in this price range, the powerful sensor on the A7 IV really shines in low light conditions. The Sony A7 IV has low noise throughout its entire ISO 151,200 range. Low light shooting often means camera shake, but the Sony A7 IV has a 5.5 stop effective 5-axis steady shot inside stabilization. This protects against 5 separate types of camera shake during handheld shooting. This camera also has some of the most impressive video capabilities out of anything Sony has released. It can shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second with absolutely no time limit. That's right. No more shooting in awkward 30-second bursts. You can start rolling and keep shooting until you capture all of the footage you need without worrying about this camera overheating. It's been years since the first dual memory card digital cameras were released, and I'm happy to see 2 memory card slots on this camera. It supports QF Express type of cards in one slot and SD cards in the other. The peace of mind I get from having a backup save for all of my wedding photography images is worth its weight in gold. The autofocus is another standout feature of this camera. Phase detection POI